Hello, welcome to cEDH Budget Brews. I'm Tim. Tonight I'm joined by Brandon. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So tonight we're going to go over some advantages and disadvantages of beginning cEDH on Kess. I oftentimes get a lot of questions for what deck should I start with? And I'm going to go over some of the ones that I personally think are good beginner decks and why, regardless of what budget you play them at. So these will all be decks that are you can either pick up at the 500, the 750, the 1K, or the budgetless, or in between. I think that they will all scale relatively similar, depending on what your meta is like. I do always want to put in the caveat that you should always match your meta. So if your meta is budgetless proxy, you should play budgetless proxy with your meta. If your meta doesn't do proxies and it's budgeted, return in kind. With that out of the way, let us begin. Kess is a Grixis commander. 1 red, 1 black, 1 blue, and a colorless. She's a 3/4 flyer. She has an activated ability of, during each of your turns, you may cast 1 instant or sorcery card from your graveyard and then exile it if you do. And you just pay its mana cost and you flash it back. There are 2 versions of Kess currently floating around. There is the Turbo Naz Kess by FamG, which is definitely a little bit more on the go burr side of things. It wants to pack things like Rain of Filth, Jeweled Lotus, couple other rituals that aren't necessarily present in the mid-range build, Tainted Kess build by Fiddler. In fact, there's exactly 13 cards between the two that are different currently. So the Turbo Naz Kess is a little bit more stormy, whereas the mid-range one, the Tainted Kess, is a little bit more, it's running like Toxic Deluge, so it's running a little more board control. I personally, out of the two, prefer Kess as a mid-range shell. I actually personally tend to lean it a little bit farther. I tend to run more than just Toxic Deluge and Psych Rift. A lot of times at bare minimum, I'll run Pyroclasm. Even sometimes I'll run a 4th sweeper. Mostly because I generally tend to play Kess in more of a meta where there's a lot of like X2 creatures, like Hate Bears, Mana Dorks, those kind of things. So having those types of sweepers and being able to flash them back with Kess to like reuse them multiple times or more than once in a turn is kind of like a really big boon for me. One of the main advantages of Kess, I feel, especially as a beginner, you gain access to most of the best cards in the format, or in our power level, in the form of you get Breach, you get Consult, you get Naz, you get Dockside, you just get all the things. You get all the black tutors, you get everything. The other thing that's nice about Kess is that you very much can just lean on Consult. And Consult is a very, very, very compact, very mana efficient, very simple combo to learn, pick up, and execute. And pick up with relatively good, and you will gain relatively good mastery of it. And by mastery, I mean like when do you execute it? What type of hate are you trying to dodge? Being able to read the table as when to do it. Those are all skills that you'll be able to at least like, as like a barrier to entry, be able to pick up relatively quickly. Where Kess scales with skill is 1, being able to learn how and when to interact and control the board or control the stack. 2, storm lines. I personally would consider the storm lines to be the highest skill cap, and learning how to navigate those are probably the most difficult. Oftentimes, I find my play patterns with Kess as I will do things, particularly if I'm playing the budgetless version, is I will simply resolve a intuition. And I will have an intuition pile of Oracle, either Tainted Pact or Consult, and Reanimate. So with that pile in Kess in play, it literally doesn't matter what card you give me. I just flash back either one of the instants or sorceries that I need, and then I play my Oracle. If you just give me the Reanimate, I just reanimate. Now you've made my combo go from black 1, blue, blue to black, black 1. And if you give me Tainted Pact, well, I just flash back the Reanimate from the graveyard. So that is one of my biggest, and then pretty much until then, I can just control the board, play sweepers and counter magic and just not die. Now, Kess also plays relatively well under stacks. A lot of the stacks does cut you off of your storm lines, but again, you have Consult as your backup plan, and you, at your heart, are a Grixis mid-range control deck.
I was going to say one of the best parts about Kess, in my opinion, is the fact that you can cast Tainted Pact or Consult twice in a turn. And so that comes in clutch really often, like a lot more often than you would think. Because if you just have one in your hand, you can just win. You just cast Consult, get Thoracle down, and then cast Consult again on the stack.
Yeah. Yeah, Kess has all of these really nice, like, not 100% obvious, like, one card win con lines. Like the intuition, like playing Tainted Pact at somebody's end step, untapping because you've gotten your Oracle, flashback the Tainted Pact again, play your Oracle and win. And then you can just literally just control the board till then. You can also relatively reliably, as long as you can have like a breach in your hand, you tutor up breach, and then you intuition for all your breach pile pieces, like your Brain Freeze, your tutor, and your LED. And then you just go from there. Kess just really, because of being able to flashback one spell per turn, opens up a lot of those lines. And that's where a lot of the learning curve with Kess comes. But the thing that's nice is that she just kind of has a nice, clean curved, optimal playing, barely being able to play it competently. Barely being able to play it competently will get you pretty good results. And then that curve up Galaxy Brain play in it is pretty streamlined. I mean, honestly, the main disadvantage with Kess is that she's not the fastest Grixis deck in the pod. So she tends to get punched on a lot, which is why I tend to play more sweepers, especially like if anybody's got an excuse to punch a Nas player, it's going to be you. If you kind of get my drift. The biggest weakness to her is she's just not, because you have to get the 3 colored pips to cast her. And like, you just can't get her out as quick as everybody else. But you have a really good core of cards. You just have like really solid game plan. So I generally tend to just kind of not build her as fast. She also plays pretty well on a budget. And then at each budget tier, she gets better. And it's just kind of like a very smooth transition at every step, I think. I think it's a really good starter deck. She may not be the flashiest or the newest commander ever, but she's really good at teaching you fundamentals, and she has a really good card.
I do want to say that as a budget player myself, I can definitely agree with you. I can say that she can punch above her weight in terms of budget, but it's still not smart to try to do that, especially if you're new with the deck.
I've played her against higher budget decks, and I have found that there's definitely a range that you can do that in. And I've usually found that range to be double the average budget of what your deck is. So if you're playing like a $500 deck, heavily discourage you to play a $500 deck in any meta where the average deck is over $1,000. You're just going to get outvalued. Like the card quality is just better. So they have better rocks, they have better ramp, they have better interaction. So you're just further hindered. Like a good one to stick to ish.
Okay. Rule of thumb.
Yeah, rule of thumb.
What would you say are the biggest play differences between the Storm deck and the Turbo Nas deck?
So for me, in my experience, and this can vary, the Turbo Nas build is probably like a turn 3, turn 4, really be able to like pop off. Whereas the mid-range build is going to definitely be like a turn 4, turn 5. And that's assuming you're doing like storm turns. Obviously, you can manually assemble a Consult Oracle, do it with 3 mana, and have a Pact of Negation as your protection. But that's not a lot of times. Like I definitely see the mid-range build being like turn 4. And you can still do storm stuff and wheel and do all those things. It's just generally tends to be the play patterns that I fall into personally. But that's not always correct. Like there's definitely better Kess pilots than me that can do a lot of things I can't do with it. But as far as like just kind of, again, like an average or a rule of thumb, that's my experience. Thanks for joining me. And if you guys like what we're doing and you want to support us, you can go to patreon.com/cEDH_budget_Bruce and throw us a buck. See, somebody threw us a buck and I got some lights on this time. So, keep that pay that electric bill, man. You know what I'm saying?
If anybody has any questions, you can always throw that in the comments. Or if you have any suggestions of who else we should cover, go ahead and throw this in the comments and let us know.